Welcome to the first episode of the Beyond the Bones podcast. I'm your host, Peter DeNoble, Dr. Peter DeNoble, orthopedic surgeon. And it is only fitting that my first guest on the podcast is none other than DAC Caldwell, otherwise known as OG Big Fish. We've gotten to know each other over the past few years, and it's been a pleasure getting to know him, following his journey that he's still on, developing his OG network. Today we're going to talk about his, journey through early life, through his career, and where he is now, and where he's going next. So, without further ado, DAC Caldwell, Big Fish,
big bro. It's good to be here. Proud moment. Not only just being in the studio, but seeing the plans, that you initially laid out. A podcast studio was always very important to you. When you're developing the plans for modern ortho and the new building, you're like, yeah, that's the podcast studio. You can see it from Route 17. So every time I drive by it, I was always looking at it, and now everything has kind of come full circle. So it's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be your first guest. So
that's it. Yeah. It's only fitting. So, but yeah, let's dive into it because, you're my inspiration for, getting the podcast up and running, looking at how to interact with social media. You're ahead of me in the game, but we need role models to emulate and to show us the way. But we're all figuring it out, and you've done a great job building your audience up. But even before we get to that, maybe we start off by, I think, just diving into who you are and what made you now. Because, I've been watching a lot of your content, and, you have some strong opinions about things. And obviously that comes from, life experiences and a perspective that is honestly very unique. You've had a unique journey. Not many people get to the NFL. That's something that's, a huge crowning achievement athletically. And, you grew up around here, I think. And why don't you tell us a little bit about, that part of your life and how you approached it and.
Yeah, so definitely. Well, we're in Paramus. I think I scored my first high school varsity points in Paramus kicking, not running the ball. But yeah, I'm from Montclair, New Jersey, right down the road, next county over, Essex County. It was parents, huge inspiration in my life. Older brother, 3 years older than me. Those are probably the three most important people when it comes to, the person that I am today, the man that I am today. The leader that I like to, see myself as, that I'm always looking to grow into and develop into. And, I always grew up with the mindset that, wasn't even really like a belief. I just knew that I could do anything, and it's something that I learned at a very young age that the equation is very simple. If you figure out what you want to do, and then you figure out what it takes to get there, develop a plan, figure out, the sacrifice, discipline, or consistency, all those different things that I probably didn't know what they were called at a young age. But if I just practiced that stuff, I would get better. So growing up, I always thought that I'd be in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball. I was laughing at my fifth grade yearbook. I said I would play in all three. Fell short, yeah. But that was just always my mentality, just always, not necessarily super cocky, but more so just if I want to achieve something big, I know what it's going to take. And I learned at a young age that one of my advantages was being able to sacrifice a little more than others. So that that was a big thing for me.
I mean, if I think we all at some point in our lives, when growing up, when we're very young, most of us want to be in the NFL, want to be in the NBA, and at some point you have that phase goes away, kind of reality sets in. You see other people who are better than you, and you think you're great in the driveway, and then the guy down the street kicks your butt, and you're like, okay, that, if that guy's kicking my butt, everyone's, so then you start to, everyone kind of levels out. How do you take, how does that, whereas most people, that dream kind of just fades away, and reality sets in, and most people don't honestly have the athletic ability for that. How did you tap into that? Was it I mean, obviously you have a lot of physical gifts, but a lot of people have physical gifts. So it takes both, right? Mental and physical. But how do you tap into that, mentality? And was it just directed towards sports, or were you finding that you could achieve those things in other ways, and then you just applied it to sports?
Yeah, that's a good question. For one, me, I just figured out that if I just keep going, then other people eventually are going to stop. And that was always big for me. And I probably learned that just as much or more academically. I mentioned I wanted to be in the 3 different leagues, but for me, I didn't come from parents that played sports. My dad was always athletic, but he grew up in, the South Bronx, like just playing outside in the street. A lot of stickball, a lot of basketball. Well, I can't say I didn't come from an athletic family. My uncles and my grandfather on my mom's side, they both played pro baseball. Of course, my uncle, Larry Doby, second black baseball player, first in the American leagues. My grandfather, he played for the New York Giants at the time, but he actually decided to make a change. He got injured and decided to walk away from it and became one of the first black principals, I believe, in New Jersey. He was one of the first black athletes at Seton Hall. So it was always – they always liked athletics, you know what I mean? But when my parents in my household, it was never a thing. My parents didn't know anything about football. I started playing by accident. I was always just focusing on basketball mostly. But they were always very clear with me, like, that is a extracurricular activity. Your responsibility is academically. So there was never – it wasn't even a comparison. It wasn't like – oh, I need to get my grades up so that way I can play sports. It was, no, your grades are going to be up, and, depending on how up they are, you'll have the opportunity to, play. And for me, I learned very young that, you just have to make an impact on whether it's a small game, whether it's a practice. I wanted to make an impact in the classroom. So it was all about competition. Like, I had this competitive edge, and it probably – came from me never feeling like I was doing enough. Like, I always felt like, oh, this person's better than me, so I got to, figure out a way to, beat them. And that's just the mentality that is carried on.
That's sort of like a Michael Jordan, right? Yeah. Right? He always seemed like he was, like, you watch the documentary, it seems like he was always the guy who was always needed to beat you in, like, cards or, coins, or, you know what I mean? Like, there is a certain mentality, it seems like, especially, particularly with athletics, where you have to, because it's competition at the end of the day. That is what divides you between you and the next guy when it comes to athletic achievement, especially. You always have to be winning, right?
You got it. It's a mentality. And it's funny, somebody asked me the other day, a little kid asked me, he said, have you ever won a championship? I was like, dang, I don't think I've really ever won a championship. Like, I've won, like, maybe little conference things here and there, but I never won, like, a high school state championship or even a basketball camp, championship. Never really won a championship, so maybe it's always just kind of chasing that. But in competition, even now, it's a struggle for me to commit to certain things, because I know that once I commit to it, it's like I got to be all in. I got to be all in. So
that's interesting that you bring that up, because, of, like, the whole thing this week was, like, Giannis, about the failure. Was it a failure? And I guess it just depends on your perspective on it, right? Like, the Bucks got eliminated in the first round by the Heat, and a reporter asked him, as they asked him last year, they asked him this year, do you consider your season a failure? And of course, he doesn't see it that way, right? He's an athlete, he's been an MVP, he's a champion. So for him, it's about the process, and he sees the long game. Whereas if you're a fan of the team, you're covering the team, you feel failure. And it's sort of the optics. I was thinking a lot about it. It's like, if you see everything as failure, if he perceives that as failure, how demoralizing is that? How do you get yourself up the next day and continue to work towards that? And the reality is, sports almost exclusively is failure, except for the very last team every single year. So almost all of sports ultimately results in failure, right? If you think about it, look at college basketball. Every single one of those teams that are really good are going to end the season on a loss, right? So it's like, it's a crazy, that's how crazy sports are, actually. So you have to enjoy the process, because if you are just in it for the win at the end, you're going to be disappointed most likely.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a combination of setting goals and then managing expectations based on what those goals are. I saw that, and I saw Giannis respond, and I tried to put myself in his position. And for me, I actually do think it was a failure. Like, it's a failure. But it depends on, I don't know what their team's goals are. Like, but there's nothing wrong with failing. I think we have a misconception as far as, that there's a problem failing. If I go to the gym, you're going to get the most out of it if you go to failure.
Right.
That's perfectly fine. The person who goes to failure is actually getting more out of the gym than the person who kind of just said, let me set my goals, not so high. True. And then, kind of just, have to check it off the list.
Right.
So the failure, nothing wrong with it. If you set your goal to win a championship and you don't, okay, we failed. But the great thing about sports is once you bounce back, you learn from the lesson and you hopefully can get it next year.
It's kind of like, failure is a word, right? We get caught up in words, I think a lot of times. So failure as a fan fails all in. As a fan, you're like all in. You're either going to, you're going to ride the highs and lows, but if you don't win the championship, that's a failure, and you feel like, okay, you go back to whatever you do as a job, whatever. But failure as an athlete, maybe it's different. Maybe, you need to fail to get to that next level. You need to experience the hardship. We know that's what sharpens your edge.
And if you don't see it as a failure, then it's like, I want to be very realistic about certain things that I'm doing throughout the day. Like, is this thing helping me get to a goal, or did this thing lead to me failing today in my goals, or so I'm very black and white with it. So it's either we won, we succeeded, or we failed. And there's nothing wrong with failing. It's just, hey, we got to get back to the drawing board, figure this out. Giannis, I've never been in his position, making the type of money he's making. I don't think anything's probably considered a failure. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about it from my point of view. But I would love to be in that position to where, I'm Giannis and I'm sitting there and I got all this hardware, MVPs, championship already.
It's all icing at that
what I mean?
maybe.
Like, so who am I to say whether it's not, it's a failure? But I tend to look at things more black and white.
But I think, in your case, so for instance, my understanding is like, so you entered, you went to college, you played 4 years?
4 years in college, yep.
And then how does that work? Like,
especially now with the draft time. It's like,
how does that work?
So even before then, I went to high school at Montclair High School, and I didn't have a scholarship outside of high school. So I actually had to do a year prep school. So to me, that was a failure at that time, where I set a goal that I wanted to get a scholarship at the end of high school. I didn't, but I didn't allow that to stop me. Just went to prep school, convinced my parents. I had no idea what prep school was. But one of the coaches at Richmond, he came and he said, hey, we don't have any more scholarships. I was playing running back at the time. And he said, maybe you should go to prep school. And first I'm like, well, maybe you should just give me a scholarship, but if you want to help me. But I looked up some prep schools, wanted to go to like one of these military schools where it's like they damn near play other colleges. It's all guys, just mostly grade issues, but like very talented. And then I wanted to compete against them. So I actually decided, my parents, they were like, no, if you go to prep school, you're going to academic prep school. So I ended up at Lawrenceville, and I landed on Lawrenceville. When I was searching through the league that they play in, they actually played against the #1 recruit in the country that year. It was Myron Rolle at the time, who's now a neurosurgeon.
Wow.
So, interesting story. Yeah. So, and of course, I go to Lawrenceville, and the game that we play them, he took off his whole senior season just because he had an injury. So, for him, you're #1 recruit, you could do that. Didn't end up getting a chance to play him, but earned a scholarship at the end of that year, went to a small school, the College of William & Mary down in Virginia, Colonial Williamsburg. Visited there maybe 7th and 8th grade. Never thought that I would end up going to college in a colonial town, but it was a beautiful campus, and it probably gave me the best experience that I could have asked for at that time. It was sports that were very, very high on the list that I thought, you get to play at big school every year. And then the academics were on par with the schools that I actually did get into out of high school, because it's not that I didn't get into other schools out of high school. However, they just weren't scholarship schools. They were like, and I hate to say this, but every time I say it, it sounds weird, but I ended up turning down Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Cornell, and Colgate. Yeah, I ended up turning them down before I even got into a prep school. So I rolled the dice a little bit, bet on myself.
Wow.
My parents, they
wait,
rock
hold
with
on.
me.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Because wait a minute.
Yeah.
You're rejecting all the Ivy League schools. Now, is that because they weren't offering money? Or because a lot of times my understanding was like, they don't offer you money, but like they offer you educational money or whatever.
Set you up with a little job here,
Right.
For me, it was two things. It was probably the biggest thing. I like to say it was 50-50, but probably the biggest thing was the fact that I remember visiting Princeton as a junior. They had a junior day, and they allowed us to watch the practice. And I saw the practice, and, in my head, my goal was, get a great education, but I still wanted to be able to compete at the highest level football-wise and eventually play in the NFL. And I saw their practice, and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to get me there. Like, it just wasn't I'll be totally honest, I wasn't impressed with the level of talent.
Program.
With the program.
So it was the program.
Right.
Your goal at that point was to get to the NFL. And how many guys from Ivy League schools get to the NFL? It's more like Ivy League is their pinnacle.
Now, looking back, I do believe that you can go from anywhere. But for me, that talent, I just wanted to challenge myself a little bit more. And I told my parents, I said, hey, I'd love to go to these schools. However, I'm not stepping foot on a football field if they're not paying for my education. I said, there's no way that I'm, putting my body through this, sacrificing my body unless a school's going to be willing to pay for my education. So, like I said, it may have been a little bit leaning towards the, competitiveness, but that was something very big for me as far as not playing football without having a scholarship.
So that's interesting. So then you went to College of William Mary. You did all 4 years. You obviously generated enough good tape, good stats, that you entered. Did you enter the draft?
Yeah, I was, but I didn't get drafted.
So you didn't get drafted, but you were like there. People had you on their board.
Yeah, I got a couple calls during the draft.
Yeah,
I got a couple calls from the Giants and the Colts. The Giants, I had met with them, and the Colts had flew out to my high school and did a private workout with me. So I knew that I had some pretty solid interest there. And I actually committed to the Giants in the 6th round. They had just drafted my boy, Adrian Tracy. I think that was their last pick.
Okay. They
drafted my boy. He played D-end. And they said, hey, I don't think they're supposed to do – hey, whatever. It is what it is at this point. But they let me know that they were going to be offering me a free agent, pickup if I wanted to sign with them. And when you're a free agent, you get to choose what team.
Right.
So I actually was committed to the Giants, and the Colts ended up calling, and they said, hey, we may get you at one of these last picks in the 7th round. They probably told like 100 people that. But they ended up not drafting me. But I spoke to all the coaches on the Giants team, and I had only spoken to the scout on the Colts. And I said, you know what, I'm a little uncomfortable. I haven't even spoken to the coaches. The DB coach actually went to William & Mary on the Colts. So I was like, I haven't even heard from him. I was trying to feel it out. Like, the Giants,
right.
I was comfortable with the Giants and being a local guy. If I went with the Giants, I wasn't going to get cut from the team. If I got cut from the 53, I was still going to be on practice squad. I knew that it was that type of – they like keeping the local guys and stuff like that. But me – I was like, I'm not trying to play it safe. I want to compete. So I got a call, and it was like, hold on. It's like, hey, it's Bill Polian. It was like the president of the team, CEO. I forget what exactly his position was. And then Coach Caldwell, Jim Caldwell, he ended up calling me, and he's like, we want you. Like, are you going to come? And I'm like, I'll be there. Right. My 2 favorite safeties were also on the Colts, Bob Sanders and Antoine Bethea. So I ended up committing to them. And for me, I was like on the team, on our William & Mary team, we had 2 guys get drafted that year. Sean Lissamore, local actually from Bergen County, and Adrian Tracy, who I mentioned earlier. But I was the guy on the team where wasn't supposed to, really go. So a lot of like my friends, where we knew that the other guys were going to get drafted, it was kind of like an unsung hero type of thing to them, where it's like I saw it give them a lot of hope to where the guys that were still in college, they're like, it's not like he just – was highly recruited, All-American all
Right.
4 years. So it's
So that's interesting. So you
Yeah.
kind of inspired others to say like it's possible.
yeah.
That's
It
cool.
was a cool thing. It was a cool thing.
And you made the roster, right? You weren't.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother thing that not a lot of people know about. When you sign on the team, that just means you signed, you know, and at that point, there's probably over 120 people on the roster. That 120 gets down to 46 on the active roster.
Damn.
That's you see 46 people getting dressed, you know, when you watch a game. I think it may have moved up at this point, a few people, and then there was 53 that actually get paid. So
Wow.
it's pretty much you're cutting more than half of those people.
Yep.
So let's just say at my position, they may have 12 safeties in camp. They're only keeping 3 or 4. And they're very clear on that from the beginning. So even though you're there, your coaches from the first day, they say, look to your left, look to your right. Yeah, probably both of these people won't be. It's like, yo. And it's just kind of like, yeah, that seat that you're sitting in doesn't have your name on it. Most of you won't be here. It just is what it is. And for it kind of can play tricks. It became more of a mental game at that point more than physical. You're not practicing as much. You know, you're used to high school, college, where you're out there getting tired in practice. I wouldn't even get tired in practice. You only get a couple reps. So it's like you got to maximize. I remember figuring out, like, making sure I'm walking through the cafeteria the right way, just to kind of, you know, because they're evaluating everything.
Every aspect of it.
And it's how you interact with your team, different things. So, you know, you get there, and I unfortunately, the first week into camp, which was very hard for me, preseason has always been extremely difficult for me. Being away from my family, there's a lot of pressure. Your dream is right there, and you're right here, and you want to do any and everything that you can to get there, and just one little thing, and you're back home, and everything's back to a non-Giannis failure, like a real failure where you're broke back home failure,
broke.
like a little different level of failure.
Right.
But yeah, so I remember calling home crying. I called home crying in prep school. I called my boy Ace, who he played in the league. He was a couple years ahead of me. I called former teammates, my boy BT. I remember calling him, and there was a call that I made to him, and he's just like, bro, like, what's up? Like, you're one of the most confident guys, like, that I've seen. Like, I look up to you. It was my young boy. He played the position after me, and it kind of was just, I was kind of stuck in like a weird mental position. And I don't know if that led to what ended up happening next, but I remember like a couple days later, I just tore my shoulder. Thought like, this is over.
And this is in training camp when you're trying to do everything right.
Trying to make
and if you're injured, I mean, you're kind of.
I got injured and I tore it, and then I went out there the next day and I was like, no, I'm good. I just put a brace on it, and then I like completely tore it like that day.
What'd you tear?
My labrum.
Yeah,
my labrum. Yeah, I had a labral tear.
Okay.
And
did you dislocate it, or was it like a superior labrum?
It slid out. So,
so you dislocated
I
it.
dislocated it.
You dislocated it. So you dislocated
it popped
your shoulder?
out the back, I believe. Yeah, I dislocated my shoulder, labrum tear.
That's a little bit more rare.
Yeah, that's what they were saying.
Higher energy.
Yeah. And it was weird because I was like going like this, and a lineman. That's when I realized the difference between college lineman and all he did was just give me like a little stick, and it's just like my arm just like
went out.
And I was like, they're gonna cut me. You know, I'm not a draft pick. You know, they gave me this little bonus. They're not worried about it. Like, they'll just cut their losses. And I remember being in the training room, and Gary Brackett, Jersey guy, he was one of the captains of the team. And everything at that point is very, like, there's no feelings. Like, when somebody's talking, like, yo, you make it cut. Like, it's like, yeah, you know. And I'm like holding in tears. Like,
right.
Like, what do you mean?
It's very nonchalant. And you're like, your entire life is revolving around
everything's nonchalant. And a lot of the older guys, I used to think that they forget what it was like to be trying to make the team, but I think it's more or less where they understand that they have to be that way because they got to you have to be built for it. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like you got to understand, like, yo, it's a cutthroat business. It is what it is. So I remember Gary telling me in the locker room, he's like, well, you know, you were pretty high on, you know, the board, you know, as far as like bringing in people. So, you know, they may end up keeping you. And that was it. And then I was like, all right, hopefully they. So they ended up. I remember, I think Polian came in there, Bill Polian. He said, "Yo, we're gonna keep you," and I was like, I wanted to just like I was ecstatic. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, I could just have surgery, recover. I was going to miss the whole year.
Oh, wow.
But at least I'd have time to kind of get back and try it again next year, which was almost like kicking the can down the road because I didn't want to go through all that again. Like it's mentally draining just going through that camp stuff. I'm sure you dealt with it, going through, medical school and stuff. But it was tough, but I ended up, staying out in Indianapolis, getting my shoulder repaired. Shout out to Me Duogi. It's like my family cousin. He does a lot of work in D.C. with a lot of the sports teams there. But he got me right, my shoulder. And then the next problem was the lockout. It was the strike, the lockout. So now
that was the next year?
The next year. So now I had to come back and try to get a spot where they had brought in more rookies. And now I'm competing against more people.
You got injured in training camp.
Yep.
The year you get drafted. But you get signed and then put on injured reserve?
Put on injured reserve.
And so you get paid for the year, but is it a 1-year deal?
You get everything in the NFL is a 1-week deal. It's a week-to-week deal unless you sign guaranteed money. So how it works is you can get paid, like let's say you have a contract. I had a contract 3 years, whatever, it's all minimum. Most people in the NFL, probably 80% sign the minimum deals. Mm-hmm. The big deals, those are the ones that you see, but it's all based on just what the league minimum is. So I probably had like a 3-year, 1-point-something deal, which I remember my friends, they'd Google it and be like, yo, you make it. I'm like, bro, it does not work like that. First off, take half off the top for taxes, and then you have to be on, it's a week-to-week thing. So
they could just cut you at any point.
So you get paid based on X amount per year, but it's divided by 17 weeks. So therefore, if you're active the first week, then you get paid that active amount. If you're not active the next week, you're not getting paid that active amount.
So there's another amount, it's lower?
It varies. You could be off the team. So if you're off the team the next week, you're not getting paid. Or if you're, if they decide to, there's a few different things that they can do. But mainly, if you're on practice squad, you can get cut and brought down, then you could be brought back up to active, especially with a rookie. There's a lot of
multiple tiers, and they can kind of play around with it as the year goes on. But if you're on an injured reserve, you get like a basic rate.
Basic salary. Yeah, it's less than, your contracted amount. But for me, it was still amazing.
Something. And you're hanging around. You're around the team.
I'm around the team.
Okay.
You're not allowed in meetings or anything like that, but you're in the training room most of the time when they're not there. But, I would still go to the games. I still would hang out with a lot of the players and stuff, especially the rookies. So it allowed me to still be around the team, get familiar with the guys, and at least see how the NFL operated. So I was able to take heed to a lot of that stuff, which was beneficial. Now, the downside of it was you're still excluded. You're still an outsider. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then the following year, because we didn't have you don't have OTAs, you didn't have minicamp because it was a lockout. So normally that's time where even before some of the rookies can come in, I can get up to speed, compete, show the coaches, get playing time. Where this was a different situation, I was thrown into it, and it was just training camp. So there was no OTAs, and that's one of the biggest advantages that you have. And I can remember my coach, he told Antoine about the starters to leave the room, and he wrote on a board. There may have been 8 of us left in the room, and it was 1 through 12 or 1 through 11A and 11B. And I was either 11A or 11B, but for the purpose of the story, I was 11B.
There you go.
And but definitely it was either 11A or 11B. And I'm just sitting there looking at this list, and the coach is like, yeah, so, we're keeping 3, maybe 4, but probably just 3. We'll probably keep an extra corner. But we're just keeping 3 safeties. And I'm like, I keep reading the list as if it's going to change. Damn, that's 12 people. I'm the 12th person. Okay, this is good. And you got a couple weeks to change that. And also, I can remember that was what ended up happening that year. This is a tough one. Make sure you prepare for conditioning test by doing the conditioning test. I failed my conditioning test.
Okay.
And I failed it, a lot of mental reasons. I never took it. I never did it. I was like, I'm working out. I'm in shape. I don't need to.
Right.
I knew what it was going to be, but I didn't prepare.
Test.
I didn't study. I didn't prepare. So that was on me. That's something I had to take accountability for. So now that had already happened, and I passed it the next day or 2 days later, but it puts a bad taste in your coach's mouth. You know, it's like you missed the whole year injury.
Yeah.
And now you failed your conditioning test. Like,
okay.
Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not serious about it. So I decided at that point that I was going to become a different person than I ever had been. I was never the type in practice to be like, you know, the asshole on the field where you're just like hitting everything and just doing extra stuff. And I decided I was going to be that person.
Just take it to the top.
I said, if
basically.
I'm getting cut, then
you're going out.
I'm going out swinging.
That was like the Jeremy Lin thing, right? He's like, if I'm getting cut, I'm going to just go out, all in.
Yo, y'all going to really cut me. If y'all cut me. So I decided in practice, I wanted to remove even the thought of this conditioning test, which meant that I'm going to run full speed. I'm hitting everything moving. I can remember like pissing off all the offensive players. I was the guy. I don't care if I'm on the other side of the field. I'm running you down and I'm hitting you. And if you have the ball in your hand, I don't care if you're running back to the huddle. I'm hitting the ball out of your hand.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Just be an animal.
I would tell cats like don't do drills with me unless you're trying. Like don't line up with me unless you're trying to like. I want to be able to see people like, you know how you're in line with somebody else, they got the other line, and they're counting to see like, yo, Caldwell number 2, and let me move.
Right. You're changing the way people perceive you.
I changed it completely, and I can remember Coach Caldwell coming to me. I flew my boys out to camp, like 2 of my best friends. I flew Maya and her homegirl because I was like, I needed a lot of love around me, and And I tapped into a different level, and Coach Caldwell came up to me and said, "Hey, Caldwell, you've been flying around," and he gave me a challenge. He said, "Yeah, you've been flying around in practice. We're all kind of excited to see what you'll do in a game." And it was kind of like one of those things, like, you know, anybody fly around in practice, but what you're gonna do in a game, and it was I don't even know. It was like a switch. Like I've never been in like autopilot. You know how they talk about like you're just in your zone? For those 4 to 5 weeks of camp, like I was just flowing. Like I went out there and I was just a totally different player. I led the whole – this is like my claim to fame. I led the whole preseason in tackles that year. Like everybody.
Wow.
Like I made up my mind like, yo, I was going to be the person that other teams were going to see on film, even if I didn't make it on this team. And
generate good film.
That's it. So by the 3rd preseason game, we're going up against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, the 3rd preseason game. That's the one where all the starters play for like a good amount. And here I am running out the tunnel starting by the 3rd preseason game.
Wow.
And it was unreal. It was
amazing.
Unreal. It was
That's
unreal.
Really
like I'm looking at like Aaron Rodgers on the other side. Like I'm like, yo, what? Like, yo, this is played well that preseason game. The next preseason game was kind of just like a, you know, just to, you know, kind of just being there for a quarter or 2.
Don't get injured.
Don't get injured. And I remember my coach pulling me out and them kind of giving me that look like, yeah, you good, like you probably gonna make the team. And ended up making the team. Yeah, ended up making the team. So that was a big moment for me.
So that was the second year.
That was my second year.
And then you played that year.
Mm-hmm.
And
then yeah, so I ended up starting about 13 games that year, 13 or 14 games, and the week I got home, not even the week, the day I got home, I was playing basketball at Montclair High School. Y'all can see where this is going. I was playing basketball back at my old high school, all my friends and stuff. I set up a whole weekend. Like I had friends come from the Colts, from college. I'm like, yo, fly up. We going out every night. Like, we're gonna see like all this hard work. We're gonna have
show
the fun.
Them the
like, yeah, like, yo,
bit,
this is.
Right?
And I go up for a rebound. You know, my basketball game at that point. You know, high school, I was all skin knee team, like just the hustle player.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that was my game. So I didn't have like a finesse game that I could just chill. It was just one speed. Went up to get a rebound, come down on my best friend's foot. Break my ankle.
Oh.
Yeah, broke my ankle. And you know how it's like I twisted ankles before, you know, done different things, and everything flashed before me, like in a matter of like 2 seconds. And I just saw it like, yeah, this is going to go downhill. before it gets better, it's going to get worse. And, went to the hospital that day. They told me it was, it's like, it may be like a hairline fracture. And that was probably the worst thing, because what ended up happening was I tried to, train on it just as if it was like a hairline fracture, sprain, but it ended up being worse. And I can remember 3 months later when we were going to start camp, because I went back to Indy to kind of rehab it, but they were like, yo, what's wrong with it? I'd run, and then like 2 hours later, I couldn't walk. So I'm like, yo, I need an MRI. Like, there's something's not right here. And I knew it from the beginning, but I was trying to convince myself, So I went. They flew me down to Charlotte to the ankle specialist down there, foot and ankle. And he walks into the room, and he says, hey. I said, hey. I said, hey. He's like, I have a question. And I'm like, okay. He's like, are you still planning on playing football still? So this is like March. I'm like, yeah, like I need to be ready. Like,
that's what I do.
We have OTA. Like, what do you mean? Like, I got the latest. I need to be ready by camp. Like, what do you mean? Like, he said, this is the worst ankle I've ever seen. And it was because the scar tissue that I had developed through training on it.
This is based on what, an MRI or an X-ray?
MRI.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had already had the X-rays, but then the MRI.
What was the actual injury? Do you remember?
It was an osteochondral lesion. So
it
was like a
talus?
big pothole. Yeah.
On
like
the talus?
I believe so. I believe that was
so,
it. Where's the talus? Here?
Talus is like the bone upon which the tibia and the fibula sit, and they kind of, so the talus is like that big dome bone that kind of just where your ankle, most of your ankle flexion.
And that's what happened. When it clicked, it chipped. So it had a huge lesion in it.
Yeah.
Which they described as like a big pothole.
Yeah.
So that, I guess, was floating around and causing a lot of issues. And my ankle was still just super swollen. Like I was limping for months. So then he said, yeah, you're just going to have a surgery, clean it out. Should be 4 to 6 months. We don't know, what'll happen after that. So I end up getting the injury. And this is something that probably for a lot of young athletes that they should pay attention to, because I went to our team doctor. I went to our team doctor, who I have in my phone still, who I'm still tempted to call every day, just because, to be straightforward, he messed me up, man. He messed me up. And he didn't mess me up based on the procedure. He messed me up based on telling me I was getting one thing and then never telling me that they did something else, which changed the recovery. So I was supposed to get a scope. They said 4 to 6 months. And then, like I said, and I asked that doctor, like, hey, should I go to a team doctor? Because I'd always heard, you don't go to the team doctor for stuff. You got to get somewhere else. But he said, no, it's a straightforward procedure. You should be fine. And then after the surgery, I was non-weight bearing, and I was in a hard cast, which was weird because that's not what they discussed beforehand. But I kind of just, when you're in it, I didn't know anything. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, he's just telling me, hey, you're non-weight bearing for 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it was. And, so I went back, and I tried to come back in 4.5 months, 5 months. Wasn't the same. I was taking like a lot of painkillers and stuff. But they told me 4 to 6 months in my head. So I just was convinced I'm coming back in 4 to 6 months.
So are you non-weight bearing, or you're weight bearing?
No, now I was weight bearing.
So you went
I was non-weight bearing, on the little
the knee scooter?
Yeah, the knee scooter.
All right.
And then eventually I was building it back up, but I didn't feel like I was building it back up to be ready to compete in camp.
But it didn't feel right?
It didn't feel right.
Okay.
But in my head, I was just thinking like, okay, I'm going to have discomfort.
Okay.
But, like I said, I was also taking painkillers, to kind of ease that.
Let me ask you something, though. Through that process, because that's like a very, you've already had a shoulder surgery.
I already had the shoulder surgery.
You're only 1 year deep. You had 1 year off, 1 year in, and now you're back out trying to get back with another major orthopedic injury.
And a new coaching staff.
And a new coaching staff. So your world is very uncertain. Yeah. Who's giving you guidance during that period of time? And like in general, like as athletes, maybe it's similar, but like because there's a lot of pressure points on that, right? Because, and I tell this to my patients, I take care of a lot of athletes from high school or even before high school all the way up through collegiate, but you can tell there's a lot of different pressures, but I can't imagine at the professional level, you got to you're at the mountaintop, but it's not sure footing, and there's all sorts of guys right there, waiting to take your place, and there's money on the line. It's your career. There's a lot of other, and then there's a lot of expectations on your part. There's the team, there's the team doctor, there's the trainers, there's agents. Who's giving you the advice on terms of like, did you get the right procedure? Should you get a second opinion? Who helps you through that process, if anyone?
Nobody. And you got to understand that's pretty much like when it comes to the NFL, that's their mentality. It doesn't matter whether it's an injury or whether it's something financially. They you come in, you get these courses when you're a rookie. You sit in this class for 2 hours, then you're going to learn everything you need to know about finance. And what it ends up being is, don't work with anybody. That's pretty much what they say. Just don't work with anybody. But there's
what do you mean by that? Meaning
like
don't trust anyone?
Yeah, like don't trust anybody. Because then if they tell you to, then they're obligated. They just try to say like don't work with anybody. And they have like NFL people. I guess they have like NFL qualified financial advisors and stuff like that. But as far as something like an injury, there's nobody giving you guidance except the team. And it's a huge problem because
it's conflict of interest though, right?
It's a huge conflict. And my issue, which I said, he didn't mess up my surgery, I don't think. And especially how it is now, when I found out what he ended up doing, a lot of those fail. And what he ended up doing and why I was non-weight bearing was a microfracture. Mm-hmm. So they dig into the, for the audience that doesn't know, they dig into your bone to create, stimulate growth, with the blood. But the difference is once they do that, it takes a 4 to 6 month recovery to 12 to 18 month recovery. I was never told that. And I actually was never told that at any point until 3 years later. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, when I was in Canada. And I ended up breaking my other ankle and having the same doctor do the procedure. And this one, right after the surgery, I didn't have a cast. And I asked him, I said, hey, why don't I have a cast? Why am I able to put weight on it? And he said, oh, no, this was just the scope. That one was a microfracture. That's a much longer recovery. That's when I started asking questions and finding out that here I was trying to come back in 4 to 6 months, but it actually should have been 12 to 18 months. And a lot of it was my ignorance as well, and me being naive and being so gung-ho on, we got new coaches, I got to come back, and nobody told me. So, here I never even passed my physical. I didn't even pass. I don't even know if they tested me. I remember them testing me at one point, but I was just like, yo, I'm good. I'm going out there.
Yeah.
And I had the head coach. I'll tell you what some of the pressures were. Chuck Pagano. A lot of people love Coach Pagano. My relationship was a lot different than him. Was a lot different with him, and I'm not exactly sure why. However, when you have a new coaching staff come in, those aren't the people that brought you in. They bring a lot of their guys. He was coming from the Ravens. He brought their backup safety in with intentions of starting. So here I was the starting safety that was coming back, but here I had this injury. Antoine Bethea, Hall of Famer. If he's going to be a Hall of Famer, he's going to start. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was very clear. Twan's starting, and it was this other position. So, therefore, I remember going into the coach's office when he first got there and saying, like, hey, just introducing myself, David Caldwell, just small talk. And he very strange. He's like, oh, have you met Tom Zibikowski? And I'm like, yeah, I saw him, like that's the safety that he brought in. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, he's like, yeah, he's a great guy, man. He's a great guy. He's going to do wonders for this team. Let me show you something. So he sits me down and he goes on YouTube and he shows me a boxing match with Tom Zibikowski, like fighting some slouch or something. It was like something off-season type of thing where Tom was like, I guess, a boxer, whatever. I don't know. But he's showing me all this, and I'm just sitting there like, yo, this is kind of weird.
He's hyping up
your
guy.
I'm
your
like,
guy's
bro,
going to replace you?
I'm about to compete with the dude. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, so that just kind of fed into it as well, which I was like, I need to come back and compete like ASAP, as fast as possible. And it ended up I should have been much more proactive as far as with asking about my injury and listening to my body. I knew I wasn't ready.
That's one of the things that I find is like very, it's counterintuitive, like a lot of things in life. But I when I talk to athletes, the motivation between the parents, the kid themselves, when they have an injury, when they've broken something, torn something, maybe they've had surgery or not, but they're recovering. And I always tell this to them, and I think they get it, is a lot of times they're looking for scholarships, they're looking for college scholarships, and it's like, yeah, you want to play because there's the joy of playing, but if you zoom out a little bit and there's the bigger picture, right? You don't want to generate bad tape because you could go out there, and if you're really good and you're at that level where you're trying to get a scholarship, but you end up generating bad tape, what are you going to tell them? Well, I was injured. No one wants to hear that. So you're better off staying out, recovering fully, going through the whole process, and being at your max. Also, if you go back, you're at risk of re-injuring yourself and putting yourself at a grave disadvantage down the road that could eliminate your opportunities. So I always have that conversation with my athletes and their parents, and most of them understand that. Some of them don't, but some of them listen to me, and others they learn the hard way.
And it's tough even, at a professional level, every level that you go up, it's like you listen to your parents less and less. Listen to your parents. And this can hurt you in a lot of ways. Where my dad, you've met my dad before, he's the type, like if he was out there with me, he would have been like, no, you need to check on this, you need to check on that. If you're not feeling right, don't go in. But I was just so caught up into it. And the thing about with sports, we got to understand at a certain level, it's just business. Even in college, you may not see it as a business as a player, or even in high school, you may not see it as a business as a player. But I bet you your coach sees it as a business. If they're not there the next year, that's money out of their pocket. Same thing with college. So what happens in the NFL is that as soon as you tell them that you're good to go and you step on the field, now they can cut you without owing you any money. And for me, it was a certain point that I realized, like, I'm not healthy. I'm going to get cut, and I was questioning all the stuff like, man, I should have just got this thing right. But you got to understand, in my head, I'm still thinking 4 to 6 months. This is the best this may, ever feel. So I remember even after getting cut, I was brought into by the team doctor, Dave Hammer, I believe, not the orthopedic surgeon. They brought me in team doctor, and you have to fill out paperwork, which is pretty much like a release, form. And it's letting them know, like, hey, you're injured, and you were not. You're not injured, and you were not injured at the time of cutting you. Because if you are injured at the time that they're cutting you, then they have to compensate you for as long as your recovery would be. So me in my head, stubborn, naive competitor, I was like, nah, I'm trying out for a team next week. I'll be on a team. Like, I just had that competitive nature in me, and I wasn't able to step back. And I can remember sitting across just like you and I, and him saying, like, hey, if you're still injured, now keep in mind, he probably knew more about my injury and everything than anybody else because I was rehabbing with him every day. They saw me go through it, and you develop a certain connection with the guys and the trainer when you're hurt. You're there every day. They're rooting for you in a different way. It's a different, connection, especially with the coaches. The coaches, they don't want that connection because they got to be able to cut you and still, the That's trainers, there's a heart-to-heart connection there. Right. And he looked at me, and I knew what he was trying to tell me, and I still appreciate him to this day for it. And I still didn't do it. He
couldn't get you to.
He was telling me, he's like, hey, if you still need to see a doctor, if you're still hurt, then don't sign this, and then it'll be a second opinion. I hope I don't get him in trouble, but it is what it is. It was an honorable thing that he did, and I said, no, I'm good. And he knew
you didn't hear what he was saying because he couldn't really say.
And I knew he couldn't, like, he felt like, because at the end of the day, if he tells me to go do that, then that may be thousands of dollars. They would have to pay me for the whole season. Yeah. And now it's like they would have came to him and said, hey, this kid was just on the field. How did he go from being on the field to now he's looking into injury settlement? Right. And other teams look down on that as well once you start taking injury settlements. So he was like, hey, he repeated it. and he looked at me and he said, you may, want to get a second opinion because if you're still injured, then, that's a different process. Like,
right.
There's
a process for it too, by the way.
Yeah. And
right?
It's like, I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't hear it. And also understand, I still didn't know at this point that it was supposed to be 12 to 18.
But let me go back
recovery.
though. But again, you are making this decision by yourself.
Yeah.
You're not asking or consulting even with your parents or your the trainers. Obviously, have some degree of conflict sometimes because they are working for the team, but they're like you said, you have a connection with them, and they're trying to help you, guide you to the best they can. But other than that, you're just basically a competitor out there playing a collision sport, trying to make a living, trying to get back to that. You had that year where you were the starter.
And I don't know whether he knew. I assume that he knew what my surgery was, the real surgery, not what I was thinking that it was. So I'm not sure to what extent, maybe if he did know, then I take back everything I just said. No, but if he did know that it was supposed to be a 12 to 18 month recovery, and I was sitting here, coming back in 4.5, 5 months, then it's like, I don't know how that was missed.
Yeah.
I don't know how that was missed.
Sometimes with that too, I mean, I'm not a foot and ankle specialist, but sometimes, recoveries can be different and vary. A lot of times 12 to 18 months is when you're going to be feeling the best, when you're going to be performing the best, you'll be the strongest and the most capable, but you're walking on it and you're even jogging and running on it at 6 months. So, but competing, usually that's a lot longer. That's a lot longer and at the highest level. So, that's a tough one, man.
But neither here nor there. There's no ill feelings. I tell you what, for the next years, because you have a certain amount of time where you can, take action or something like that if you wanted to. I never did because I just kind of, I would love to still have a phone call with the doctor just to kind of say like, yo, this is kind of the position, that you put me in. I'm not really sure what it was about, but I kind of just looked at it as, this is just either way, even if I never play again, it's saving me from maybe, I'm not supposed to be playing. Maybe I'm not supposed to be taking these head hits. I don't even know. Like that's
right.
That's what I grew into, developing that mindset. I didn't have it at the time. At the time, I was just like, I'm going to be on the team next week.
So you ended up you got injured. You said, no, I'm maxed out. I'm maximally recovered. I'm competing. And then what happened?
Then I got cut that week.
You got cut.
I was hanging around. Like, those are my papers. So it's like, once you walk out, I had the big garbage bag, and I had a couple
make it look pretty, man.
I had a couple of my homeboys and we kind of just sitting out in the parking lot like, dang, yo, like what a difference a few months makes. So
that's wild.
So we ended up, but it's funny. It's a weird feeling. There's a certain level of relief there. It's relief because even though that chapter closed, you're still excited about, we'll see what happens next. You're gonna miss your boys that are on the team and stuff like that. And you don't really communicate with the ones who made the team, as much because it's just kind of like, I don't know if there's just this awkwardness, so it's not like
right. They
I
don't
was
know what
still
to say.
super close. Yeah, so it's just like
kind
of it is what it is.
Right.
So I ended up trying out for a couple teams. One of the things that I underestimated was that I no longer had this NFL professional recovery and rehab now.
Oh wow. Okay.
Now I'm at the crib, putting ice on my, you know what I mean? So putting like little cream that I had left over.
Right?
I don't have the massages and all that stuff. So like, damn, now I got to try out for the Giants, and I'm still injured. Like, I still felt it, but I didn't know that I was supposed to feel it. So I can remember going in there, and my 40 time was slower than what, I had originally ran, and I just wasn't myself. I had a terrible workout with the Jets, probably my worst workout, which was about maybe towards the end of the season. So it was like, you got to be ready every week. And you got to train as if you're going to have a workout. I think the workouts are mostly on Mondays, the off days, Mondays or Tuesdays. So one of the greatest experience, though, that I have to say is that I was able to work out with your team, the New England Patriots.
Oh, yeah?
And it changed my life in a lot of ways.
Okay.
I didn't make the team, obviously, But I went up there and I found out exactly why the Patriots are the Patriots. I can remember meeting, you go in there, and I'm a small name. They bring in people every week. So it's not like they bring you in and we're signing one of y'all today or we're signing y'all. No, it's like, hey, we just bring y'all in just to make, in case somebody gets hurt, we may call y'all in a few weeks, whatever. So the guy, who was it? You may know Alex Casarios.
Oh.
Who was the VP?
Nick Caserio?
Nick Caserios.
Yeah.
I apologize, Nick. Nick is a legend in my book. A legend. So first off, he introduced himself to me, and I'm like, you typically just meet the scouts and stuff. They're not a big name. So then he's like, yeah, so you'll just go to the locker room, and then, you'll be out on the field for your workout. So I can remember I go to the locker room, and I saw my boy Devin McCourty from out here. So I saw Devin. I competed against him all in high school. So I said what's up to him, run out. And I'm walking out onto the field, and there's a guy already out there, like, warming up. So now I'm, like, kind of pissed off because I'm like.
You're already the second guy out there.
Yeah, I'm like, now it's like, this guy's already warming up. I'm like, and as I get closer and closer, I'm like, all right, he's doing, like, DB drills, so he must be a guy that I'm competing against for a defensive back. I'm thinking, like, he looks a little small, so maybe he's a corner, whatever. But I'm still pissed off. I'm like, he's out here. I want to warm up. It's cold. So then I get closer and closer. I'm like, this dude's kind of like, who's this? Well, that's a white guy out there. And then I'm looking like, that's an old white guy. Like, it got me competing against this old white. It was Nick.
Oh.
It was Nick warming up. And I'll tell you why he was warming up. He ran me through every drill full speed. So he demonstrated every single drill that he wanted me to do. He did full
himself did.
Speed. The VP of the team, I'm a no-name. You know what I mean? Like, literally, not even joking. That's how seriously the New England Patriots took their jobs. And that was the standard that they have of just something simple as do your job. The standard that they had was above and beyond.
Wow.
They took, like, this is this guy's off day. His off day. And he's coming in and literally, I'm getting winded. This guy's breezing through these drills. And I'm like, yo, this is the real deal.
That's interesting. And as a fan, I hear Nick Caserio. I know he's like part of the, the administrative structure of the Patriots, makes high-level decisions and, thought of highly and stuff. But that's interesting because that actually goes to, speaks to how your process works on selecting employees.
The most important thing, right?
The most important thing is like how and what process do you, because it's very easy to hire and fire, but can you be more precise about how you select so your accuracy rate's higher when it comes to selecting and retaining good people? And the only way to do that is to have a process and to be directly involved. Because if you delegate, you are going to make more errors. That's interesting.
I became a Patriots fan that day. Like, I didn't even care if they signed me, seriously, because it showed me how much, like, your culture can determine your success, and the preparation, the discipline, the focus, all those things that determine culture. It held it on a higher level for me. I was able to understand. Like, I like simplifying things. Like, I'm never the person that says, like, I don't recognize the word hard. Like, I don't know what it means. Like, I really don't know what hard means. It's like, I look at whether it's difficult or not. So if it's difficult or not, then I can figure out how to simplify it. Hard, that means like effort and all this other stuff. I'm willing to do that. That's easy. Once I have it just simplified, like, hey, this is the equation, do this, do this, do this, I'll do it. That's always, I've always been able to do that. But I like when things make sense. Like, when a team like the Patriots wins, me just seeing that, it makes sense.
Right.
Like, it was a point in time, I don't think the Patriots even get the credit that they should get, even though we all look at them as like one of the greatest dynasties. There was a certain point in time where for like a 20-year period, a 20-year span in the most competitive sports league, where it's not the NBA playoffs now where it's game 7. So, even if you get an upset, the best team's going to win. March Madness, that's what the NFL is. It's March Madness. It's one game. And then so
how to be consistent and not have a letdown on any one given.
And there was a certain point where for 20 years they had a greater likelihood of going to the Super Bowl than Steph Curry has of making a three-pointer. Like, think about that.
Wow.
Like, they had a greater chance of going to the Super Bowl than Steph Curry has of making a three-pointer. And
it's crazy.
It's like I like rooting for that because that makes sense to me. I like athletes like that, Kobe, Floyd, like people that I see putting in a certain level of work.
Yeah.
It makes sense why they win.
It speaks to, like you said, breaking things down into simplicity, because the more complex things get, the harder it is for people and for our minds generally to execute at a high level. When you break it down into simplistic tasks, do your job. You now just do X and Y. Don't even do Z. And X, Y, and then you get good at that because you become repetitive. It's like surgery, right? If you do the same, 5 surgeries all the time, you're going to make them very efficient, very precise, and very reproducible. Now all of a sudden you're a known quantity, and you are now an expert. And so you're basically cultivating experts on the field of football the same way you would in any other industry.
And people what I realize more and more, even though people may complain about chaos, a lot of people embrace it and like it because it gives you an excuse.
It's an equalizer.
It's a built-in excuse. Like, I got so much. When you simplify stuff, it's like either you do it or you don't. And if you don't, you're going to fail and it's on you.
Right.
And if you do, then you'll succeed and it'll be on you. But I can't speak. Just being there for that day, like that's the biggest regret, not just being around them. I wish that I could have taken football out of the equation and just went and studied that organization just during that time, because the type of education that we would get, it would be invaluable just to see like their process, like you said, their system, and how no player is above the other. And that's why I love Tom Brady so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we attribute a lot of their success to the skill of Belichick and Brady, but what I think miss sometimes is their attention to detail in creating a process and a system. They call it, I think sometimes a system is used in a negative light. It's just, you're a system quarterback, or you've got a system, the system's helping you, but this is a team sport. You need a system. And those who create great systems create great teams, and all you need is a couple of superstars to buy into that. And you saw how they would bring in, and they had such a strong system. They could bring in sometimes players that were trouble players, and they would come in, and even for a year or two, they'd hit a peak. Maybe they would go off the rails, and they'd get rid of them, and they'd cut them like this, and their system would survive it.
And that's why Tom Brady is the greatest superstar in any team sport ever. Because the difference between Tom Brady, here you have a guy who, the most successful person, out of any sport, maybe any person, you would expect him to be able to, say like, I want to be treated like this. You hear stories about like LeBron. I want my whole team, all my family and friends on the plane. You want to be treated a little special.
Right.
It just happens. You know what I mean? And you see it on every team. Tom Brady, when he allows Belichick to treat him, Coach Belichick, when he allows Coach Belichick to treat him just as he would like the rookie on the team,
right, and
to demand if Brady's not performing at a certain standard, he's going to give him the same treatment that he would another. That to me sets the tone for every other player, because none of y'all on the team are more valuable to the team than Brady. So if he's allowing this, then it allows you to put your ego to the side and say, hey, we're just buying into the overall system and we trust it.
Right.
They have a proven product. Like, so guys, you get to a certain point, especially you guys, get in trouble, they already made some money, whatever. They get to the point where they just want to win. And you go to that team, you understand, like, you are just a small piece to a larger puzzle. And you will be out of here if you do not. If any day you don't fit into that puzzle anymore, or if your ego may swell up, so maybe your puzzle piece gets a little bit. We're at it. We don't need you for that. Do your job. Very simple. Just do your job. Like,
that's it. So, and that's actually part of the evolution of Brady, I think, and what's spoken about. I don't know exactly, obviously, as a fan, but like he was less amenable to being that guy later on, and that became the conflict. But that's neither here nor there. But that's a very interesting perspective about Nick Caserio. But then, you know, was that the closure of the NFL chapter, and then you ended up going up to?
So then I ended up missing that season, and then I guess right after the Giants season finished, they picked me up for the following year. So here I was, hometown now. You know, it was an amazing experience. You know, being at home. That preseason, you know how you can prepare for something and you know that like you're prepared. There was no conditioning test mix-ups on that. Matter of fact, I'll tell you what, the coach that I probably had some, you know, whatever with, but I could tell that I think he had some issues with me. He lived in Montclair, so he was cool with, like, my first, like, Pee-wee coach and stuff. He always used to mess with me, like, oh, these coaches mess with you. And I remember him coming up to me after the conditioning test and just saying, like, hey, Caldwell, like good job. Like, you know, where I was taking off on everybody. Like, I'm not saving anything in the like, I'm every rep. I was just in shape. I was focused. So I had a very good camp that year. Had some mix-ups, some big plays that I was like, I wish I could get that back. One in particular. But I was very confident in how I finished up, you know, that preseason. I was competing against, you know, they had drafted a safety. So I was competing against him, was competing against some real good players. So I knew it would still be tough. But I was happy with how I played. I remember the last preseason game, they ended up, like, taking out the draft guy and saying, like, yo, you playing the rest of the game. So I felt good. And I was like, I think I may make this team. Like, next morning, I remember phone vibrating. Like, hello. Hey, Caldwell. Like, hey, what's up? Can you come by the facility, you know, in the next hour or so? And I said, yeah, no problem.
We got a garbage bag.
And then he's like, oh, yeah, and just bring your playbook if you can. Oh,
no.
So I was like, but you know what? I wasn't really tripping off of it.
But that's good because you left everything. You empty the tank and you have no regrets, and you can say whatever the reason was. You walk away happy.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
And I still looked at it, going back to the Giannis, situation. I still looked at it as a failure. My goal was to make the team, so I failed, but I wasn't going to allow that failure to bring me down. I was going to use it to propel me into something else. Mm-hmm. So I ended up playing in Canada for a little bit. Loved the experience up there. Won't spend too much time on Canada, but it's a very interesting league up there because it's either guys that used to play in the NFL that got to humble themselves, come up there and trying to get back to the NFL, or it's guys that never made it to the NFL and are working hard. So it brought me back to that college feel where I was able to just enjoy the sport. Before I walked away, enjoy it for what it was. And, of course, that first year, ended up breaking my other ankle. So I said, you know what, I'm going to come back, play for one more year. I had an amazing coach. I was playing like linebacker. It's a different type of game there. I was playing like outside linebacker there. And it was just an amazing experience, amazing group of guys. I'm glad that I was able to walk away from football because they probably saved me like a lot of heartbreak. Even me walking away from football, it's a love-hate, and it was that for like years after, like most guys, it's not like you get your retirement cake at lunch and then you walk away.
Right, retiring.
It's somebody telling you that you're not good enough to do something that you've been doing your whole life and that you've been exceptional at your whole life.
It's kind of like a microcosm of the team, right? The team usually will end in an L.
Yeah.
Most
careers.
Either you don't make the playoffs and you end in a win, but you didn't make the playoffs, or you end in a loss in the playoffs, only one win. The end of your career as an athlete, as a professional, right? Because that's Either you end it in high school, you end it in college,
Yeah.
or you end it as a pro.
And the higher you go.
and even the greatest ones, you look at, guys like even Michael Jordan. I mean, even at the top, even Brady at the end, like he should have just taken his full first retirement, but he couldn't get enough of it, and he ended up as a loser, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it never ends well, whether it's you're getting cut or in the quiet and here's a garbage bag and a pink slip. So that's interesting, and what you do with that, because all of your energy and your time and your mental focus has been on athletics, and now. I assume you probably didn't make enough money at that point to live the rest of your life. You got to you got to see how am I going to turn this into the rest of my life and my career. So
it's a very interesting journey that you go through mentally, not only through, it's hard to prepare for it because you can prepare for it personally. But one of the things that you don't necessarily prepare for is how other people treat you now that you're no longer playing. So that was an interesting dynamic to where, and not even like on the surface level of like, oh, all my friends wanted to go out on the weekends. Now we're not going out as much. Not even that. But it was like a lot of grown-ups, a lot of like grown-ups that, I had interactions with, like my friends' parents or different things like that where I noticed like, damn, like, you treat me differently? Like, at first it was, I don't even want to get into that too much, but it was just, you just realize.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What's an example? I don't think you use names.
Let me give an example.
Like basically a difference, like the way that they would be all juiced up.
You have access to this.
Right.
You have access to this. You can, go here whenever you want. Use it, anytime that you need to. But then afterwards, it's kind of like,
it's like, how you doing? Okay.
You got that key? You got that key? Can I get the key back? Like, it's like, different stuff like that.
Doors closed.
So, and like I said, for me, the hardest part for me was understanding what other players go through. Because me, like I said, I was always prepared for this. Maybe that's why I didn't play for a long time, because in my head, football was never my number one goal. It was it was just something that, being the competitor that I am, if I'm here, I'm going to try to compete as much as I can, and it's a limited window. I can't compete when I'm 40, so I got to compete now. But that was never my number one. So therefore, I always was ready to accept, that whenever that date of failure came, that expiration date came, I was ready for it.
Yeah.
So it made me feel a lot bad, like real bad for a lot of my former teammates. A lot of my teammates who, you got the NFL guys where that's why I appreciate William and Mary so much, even though I got a City College in New York. It's my pop's alma mater. But I appreciate William and Mary so much because the stuff that I hated at the time, talking to like guys that went to LSU and Bama, my roommates, they're like, we had people helping us with our papers, note takers.
They had Chat GPT before Chat
like
GPT.
They had Chat GPT. Like, my paper's just done. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even do it, and my paper's done. Like, this book is just read. I got notes. Like, I was in class that day. You know what I mean?
They got someone to read the clip.
Yeah. So I used to be jealous of it, but then I realized very quickly, like, damn, like those guys are crippled. They crippled those guys.
Right.
They crippled them. And for me, I was like, all right, boom. I went back to teaching. I was a substitute teacher even when I was playing in the NFL. I was always substitute teaching. So I went back, got a full-time, aide position, told them like, hey, this is, I'm definitely not going to be here for a long time. Like I'm looking for other opportunities. Had some family friends help me out, put me in position to get into the medical device industry. So started off there. And then I just kind of used every little thing that I learned from sports, and you need it in the medical device industry because I thought football was cutthroat. Damn, I started working at striker, and I'm like, yo, this may be worse than the NFL, but it's it all prepared me. It all prepared me to have a competitive edge, knowing how to compete. Like, we don't take classes on, like, there's no competition one-on-one in high school or middle school. But knowing how to compete, it's such a valuable thing. And it's something that I've pretty much just relied on my entire life, whether it's sports, academics, all these type of things. So, and a lot of that starts with preparation, going back to the Patriots. So anything that I fail, I look at it and I say, my preparation must have been off. Let me make some adjustments. Let me address it, and then I'll have a better chance to win.
Okay. That's interesting. So it turns out that all those skills you learned in football through all those years, even through the NFL and the like, are now translating into things that you're doing now.
100%. And that's why sports is it's the most important thing, in my opinion, that, or maybe just competing in general, but sports, because you're working together. If you're on a team sport, it teaches you who you are, especially a sport like football. And I would not let, when I have kids, I would not let them play football. As of right now, can't play football. Learn those lessons in something else. However, what football does, for the same reasons that I wouldn't allow my kids to play, because it's just too dangerous. And it doesn't make as much business sense. Go play something where you can get a guarantee,
Right.
and less,
high
harm
risk
on your body. Yeah, high risk,
low
reward. It's like,
yeah, man, it's simple.
You're going to play something else. So, but for all those reasons, it teaches you what type of man you are every day. Every day at football, it's going to be a physical and mental battle within yourself and against that person, because on every play, it's who's the better man on this play. Either you're going to win or you're going to lose on that play. Every play that we ever had. There's no confusion. Either in practice or in the game, we get our grade sheet. Every play, plus, minus. You're either getting one or the other.
Right.
So that to me helped prepare me in ways that I have an advantage over a lot of people. And we always got to lean into our advantages. So sports is something that, even if you're not the best sports person, you're not the most athletic, play. Because there's lessons that the worst person on the team is going to receive that they're going to be able to use as an advantage, even more so than the best player on the team in a lot of ways. So regardless of your level of talent, sports, super critical, super important to play, and give your all.
Embrace failure.
Embrace it.
Because you're going to experience it from the top to the bottom, whether you're the best or the worst on the team.
And if you're not failing, it's all a gift and a curse.
Right.
Not failing, we see a lot of those people who never fail.
Right.
They were treated specially. At Montclair High School, we see it all the time.
You become become averse. You become scared of failure at that point.
Yeah.
You want to fail. You should desire failure in a way, because that is going to propel you forward.
How can you grow? Not wanting to fail is like not wanting to go through the discomfort that's required to get better. You only want to be comfortable.
100%.
But it's like failure. Like even with Giannis, like I wish that I can't even Giannis. I don't even want to. It's not that I'm giving Giannis any recommendations or advice. Giannis is Giannis. Giannis is one of those athletes that I'm talking about. That simple. I'm going to outwork everybody and then become better than everybody. So I appreciate that, but I almost would have wished that he laughed it off or was more nonchalant. Like, yeah, we failed. Now we get back to the drawing board tomorrow.
Right.
It was a fail. We make sure that we learn everything that we did wrong, everything from this lesson, so that way we can use this failure. Failures are one of the, you should be using failures. It shouldn't be something that we run away from.
Right. Yeah. It's so important. And, I know that listen, everyone's failed, right? And how we react to that ultimately determines, I think, where we end up in life, especially with our passions, with our abilities. So much latent or undeveloped ability in people because of the fear of failure, the fear of the perception of failure. Like, I don't want people to see me fail, and I think that the winners end up being the losers become the winners.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Got to be a loser first.
Yeah. Brady probably feels. I always used to think like Brady probably feels like his career, like he's still pissed off. Like Peyton Manning is still pissed off.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan is still pissed off, to the point where other people that may not have made, had the achievements that they have, but they kind of just looked at it more nonchalant. They probably feel better about it.
What's interesting about that is like, it's almost a curse also, because they, quote unquote, they win. They've won the most winningest, but then you're cursed with the oftentimes with that lack of contentment. Like, Because contentment can stifle your motivation, but you do want that natural arc in life where you're seeking out something, achieving something, failing, winning, and then you kind of want to get to a point where you're content. But I don't know, maybe I wonder sometimes if that just sticks with you and you never feel content, because that was the engine that drove you in the beginning.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because first off, I envy people who are content. I may not like the results of certain things that, their content breeds, but I'm jealous of it because I can't be content. I can remember I thought that once I walked away from my last Canadian football, game, I can remember, walking in and, we made the playoffs. So it was like, all right, any one of these games could be the last time that I ever have to feel this feeling in my stomach. And it was before the games, like really the entire night before, and really definitely the next morning. And you feel like just the uneasiness, the butterflies, all these things. And it's the anxiety that are coming through, which comes with being able to compete on a high level. And I said, I'll never feel this again, and I won't miss it. I won't miss it. And then fast forward to the first day that I was in the operating room trying to convince a doctor to use my product, and he was going to try it for the first time. And I was like, oh, my God, it's back.
It's back.
And
it's back
there
in a different way, right?
If you're always striving to do better, it's going to come back. And that's like the balance that we all look for. Nobody wants to be the miserable person that's always just in a bad mood because they're just, hey. And maybe that leads to being Elon Musk. I'm sure there's a lot of people around Elon Musk that would rather him, like, yo, don't work, this much. Like, just enjoy your life, just enjoy it. And he probably would be a more enjoyable, nicer person to be around, all these things. But when you lock in on your purpose and you understand that you have like this unlimited potential to tap into, it's very hard to just let a day go by and not work towards that.
Yeah, we have limited time on the earth, right? And it's like, how do you spend it? And there's no right answer. You'll never get it right. It's just you're gonna do you do your best, and you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna probably overwork or underwork, but at the end of the day, I think as long as you can kind of reflect and feel like you're, ultimately you're feeling like you're achieving your goals, I think then that's the right answer. But one of the things that you've been putting a lot of work into now, I see, is a lot of the stuff you've been putting on YouTube.
Yeah, let's get into
Let's talk about the real deal, where this all ends.
Yeah. Or
at least ends now, or it has come to now, has been the OG network. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, so I've realized that, I heard somebody say that your greatest weapon, and I'm not sure that it has to be used as a weapon, but perhaps it is. Your greatest weapon is the ability to communicate. And I think we're all in a day and age where we see the impact of quote unquote influencers, but it goes above and beyond the influence, the influencers that we see. Oh, that's a TikTok influencer. I took a step back and realized just how important and how different things influence and impact people to think a certain way, to act a certain way, to think that something is right, to think that something is wrong. And we have the ability through a lot of these YouTube channels and just social media in general to just communicate with so many different people to make that impact.
Right.
So for me, it's like, I want to be able to not only impact, few people in this room, even though that may be, amazing. I may feel rewarding. But I want to be able to take it a step further, both from impactful standpoint and a business standpoint, being smart, being able to, okay, if I can scale this, it almost allows you to scale your message, you scale your impact. So that's something that I've really, concentrated on. I like having a lot of these conversations, whether it's a political debate or just a conversation about religion and spirituality. It's funny. Probably the only thing that I haven't thought about putting on the network was like sports, like sports show, which would be fun, because we talk about it all the time. You need that escape. You need that balance.
Yeah.
But I just feel like right now where we are, in society, it is a war. You know, it is a war of influences in a lot of different directions. And I feel like this is my obligation, this is my purpose to make sure that I'm on what I perceive as the morally good side of it, to bring my influence, to bring my experience, to voice my opinion on stuff, and to always be open to being wrong. You know, being open to being wrong. I think totally differently than I thought 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe 5 days ago in some areas. But it's always been important for me to be able to voice that. I've maybe because I've been impacted in certain ways by people just by speeches. You know, just maybe because I felt that impact, where I could look at somebody giving a speech and it's almost the equivalent to looking at like Michael Jordan. I'm like, yo, did you see that play? And I'm looking at like a speaker. So that's something that always stood out to me. Movies like The Great Debaters, like I love that. Like I love that type of stuff.
I wonder, you know, sometimes, you know, we're all learning. We're constantly learning as we get new information day to day. Sometimes, you know, when you express an opinion, you get unexpected responses that actually help shape your thought on a particular subject matter, or not. You know, sometimes not. But I do feel like if you know, sometimes it's helpful to inject some you know thoughts into the space, the discussion space these days, which is online, social media, things like that. You know, I think that you do a good job of that. I think you certainly stimulate a lot of debates.
Yeah, and it's
you
fun.
like to
yeah, it's my parents. If you ask my parents, my dad especially will just say like, "You like to debate, you like to debate," and no, I like to problem solve. Like I like to figure out problems. So if I see a particular issue with a, it could be anything. Like I'm going to be able to address it. Like I'm going to say something about it. And a lot of times saying something about it, give me feedback, you know, and then it's like, oh, maybe I'll look at this differently.
Right.
And then that's one thing that I've been able to do, whether it's politically, any of these areas. Like if you look back, I thought totally differently. And I gave the reasons why I thought, you know, that way at that particular time, just like I give the reasons why, you know, been able to grow, share my experiences, share my opinions, because I feel like if we're only getting information from certain people, that's how we get controlled. That's how we end up doing stuff, not because we're thinking about it logically, but because we've allowed ourselves to get invested emotionally to just follow the, you know, be sheep, you know, just to continue following. Why am I this way? Oh, my parents did it. Oh, why did? Oh, my parents raised me like, you know what I mean? I don't want to be that type of person.
It's that concept of, you know, independently investigating, right? Mm-hmm. Constantly trying to use critical thinking, which I think is lacking, right? And by the way, it's almost like you can say one thing or have an opinion that turns out, you know, you after consulting with other people or hearing other thoughts, you know, a lot of times it'll soften your opinion as you start to understand other perspectives, which allows you to evolve, right, on topics, you know, which I think the problem is that we fear the apology, or at least we fear the concept of people saying, you change your opinion, you're not, you know, but that's the whole process of life and science. That's we constantly are trying to get towards a truth that we'll never get to. It's hard to explain that, but it's like there's always a new angle like that we're coming upon that could change the way we approach things or interpret things, and we should be open to that concept way more than when we do. We fear others' opinions about us. Maybe we don't, you know. But I think at some point you just have to, you know, be open to that, and that's where I think that, you know, we get into issues with like the cancel culture and wokeness and stuff, which I think on the surface talks about, you know, I think there's some merit to like being respectful to others, but then on the other flip side, being so absolute about, you know, canceling people because they said one thing when they are just human beings trying, you know, maybe giving them opportunity to evolve and consider other people's, feeling. I mean, it doesn't allow for that. And that's where I think we have.
Yeah. It's a lot of like bully mentality when it comes to like a lot of the cancel culture, because, and I look at it, I guess I look at things differently. Like, for instance, like a guy like Andrew Tate. I didn't know who Andrew Tate was until they canceled him. And then what did I do? The type of person I am, well, if they canceled him, I want to know why. He must have been saying something that they deemed necessary to cancel, but just because they deem it necessary, they're looking to control the masses. I want to be able to understand it, look at it from my perspective, independent, free thinker, and do my own research,
right. Not
just based off of what you're telling me. Like I'm supposed to just take your word as if it's gold. So it's clearly them. It's a great strategy, I guess, that they have. It's like, oh, some person can say 99% of things that will help get people to another level, help them in their day-to-day lives. But one thing, it's like, oh, we got him. Now we can cancel everything. So everything that he just said besides that, and it happens all the time. We've become so emotionally triggered where it's disgusting in a lot of ways. Like, it's just not, like, it just doesn't feel right to me where, you can have somebody that they can say something and it could be 100% true, but because like, oh, well, no, that person did that. They told me that this person, look at like MSNBC and Fox. Like, all they do is spend time. This one talks about that person, talking about that person. And most people that watch one or the other don't watch both. So it's like we become fanatics in areas outside of sports to where it doesn't benefit us to be fanatics. We don't grow. It's like Dallas Cowboys fans, they're never going to say anything bad about the Cowboys, and they're never going to say anything good about the Eagles or the Giants. But you're a fanatic, and you don't.
Right. You're a fan. You're
right. And then when we approach, let's say, politics like that, like, why be a fanatic of one group? It's cutting you out from understanding, from a logical standpoint, what's what and who's who. So that's something that I always try to take a step back and
when you have a population of people who are fanatics, it's much easier to control them, right? Versus if you have a population of people who consider lots of different opinions and have measured thoughts that ultimately are nuanced and aren't binary and aren't extreme, you're going to end up with I think bringing society forward in a more cogent, fair way than swinging, extreme like we are now, and be it, technology and these power centers that kind of yoke people back and divide us. Most people, and that gets into why, we really need to, harness, our inner spiritualities, right? And get into who we are as inherently noble beings, right? So people who we're all, I believe, born noble, and you see that in others, and we've all had different experiences coming from different upbringings and things like that, and we're all basically the same with just different experiences, and we get so wrapped up nowadays. We were talking about this yesterday about so focused on our physical identities that we lose track of who, that we're spiritual beings having an earthly experience.
Right. Yeah, that's 100% it. And even I've had a interesting spiritual religious journey, but you realize that a lot of what spirituality and religion does is sets a foundation. It sets a foundation, a moral compass, a lot of these different areas, and a lot of people who benefit, we need to look at who benefits from the chaos that they cause. Who wants us to hate that group, and what are they benefiting from it? And then you start to realize, well, we're not benefiting anything from it, but the people that are controlling us, it's no different than if two boxers are going to fight. Like they want the fanatics, they want y'all to hate each other.
Right.
They want you to hate each other.
It's a big boxing match.
But who benefits from that? The people upstairs, they don't care about either one. They're just looking at their money. So it allows, when you have people angry and tapping into their emotions, you can control them and move them in any direction, rather than when people are just, kind of just looking at things logically. And like you said, even though, we like to focus on our differences, but if people just sat down at the table, had lunch, learned about your experiences, you learned about mine, we'd realize that we're pretty much the same. We have a lot more similarities than we do differences. However, maybe our experience have shaped our perspective in different ways that have convinced us to not like that person and for them to not like us.
The more, and I agree 100%. I mean, that's why I was saying, like, I was thinking about this yesterday. Is like, the more information and perspective you have on any given subject, the less strong your opinion can be on any one given topic. Because now all of a sudden you're going to think of, all right, well, I see how they could see it that way, which is going to sort of start to balance you out a little bit, so you're not so wild on one side, and then not thinking of the other person.
Yeah.
And most people get there. Now, you're still going to have, I'm not saying don't have opinions about things, but I do think that that's what we need more of. We need to communicate, right, with each other, and not only just communicate just for the sake of kind of engaging in like political arguments, because that's just like, it's more about just sharing like experiences and just becoming connected as a community. And that's really what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, if we see each other like brothers and sisters and family members, like we all are, we're going to treat each other differently. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be, having these antagonistic confrontations in the middle of a street or in passing and driving in cars. It's going to be a lot more respectful, and then ultimately we'll be living in a way better
the energy. World. There's a scary energy that I believe we're experiencing right now in this country. And it's little stuff. It's, you get on an elevator and, normally you just, hey, hi, just little stuff. People just are so, even if it's not an aggressive energy towards the other, but people are so standoffish in the beginning.
Everyone's on edge.
Everybody's on edge, not knowing, like, is this an enemy? Is this somebody that's going to hurt me? Is this somebody that I may need to hurt? Everybody's on edge, and it's so funny to me because, like, I don't look at the news. I don't watch the news because the news is just trying to play with your emotions. Like, they're trying to, you look at anything, how, like, there's certain topics that I won't even cover on the YouTube that I know would probably get, I know the ones that are going to get the most views. You talk about what's hot and stuff that people emotionally care about, but the news, their entire job is to get you hooked, and to get you hooked, they know that they have to formulate an enemy. They want you to perceive them as the solution. But for that to happen, they have to create a problem. And the bigger that problem is that they can create, then that way you'll be more reliant upon them to solve that problem and to talk about that. So where you go to this, this is kind of you want to double down on everything that you're thinking. So you only listen to one side of it, when in actuality you get like a MSNBC. If they really don't like Trump, stop talking about him.
Stop talking about him. Right.
Like, just stop talking about him. But in all actuality, if we're realistic, I was telling my dad and my mom, like, that MSNBC loves Trump. Like, don't let them fool you. They love Trump.
They've been talking about Trump.
They talk about Trump more than anybody.
Well, anyway, and he hasn't even been, around for 4
It's like their checks are bigger when Trump's around. Like, let Trump disappear.
Cable news. That may have been the biggest impact of 9/11.
Oh, with what?
I mean, listen, 9/11, big problem, ruined, killed a lot of people locally here, impacted many lives, shortened lives from exposures for first responders, awful. But if you look at the point in time when cable news became all we looked at, the tracker, the ticker, that didn't exist before 9/11. And right at that moment, that was 20 plus years ago now, that's when cable news became a 24-hour experience. I never thought of that until just now. And I'm like, the tracker, the ticker, constantly just consuming news and consuming. And that led right into the whole lead up and the paranoia,
Right.
up into the Iraq War, where we completely turned, and now we're at war with Iraq, made up stuff.
Yeah.
And we then from there we're in a war. Now and if you think about that, I mean, that actually is one of the major things that we're just hooked on this cable news stuff. That didn't start until then. I don't remember.
I think that even with a situation like that you talk about, like even with Bush, like it's like you can convince people like, oh, this person's bad, so we're gonna raid that area, but the two have nothing to do with each other. But it's kind of just like we're all in.
But we just
need
to do something.
Yo, we gotta do something. Somebody's got to die. So it's almost as if like that type of energy continues to happen. It's like if we're warring against another country, then it unifies us. But then we're warring where it's liberals versus conservatives. Yeah. Then we're creating more and more war against each other. And both the only people that are really benefiting from it are the people at the top that control both.
Right.
They love each other.
Who, by the way, love each other.
They love each other. Yeah. Like,
and they're all just
they're all meeting.
It's like boxing promoters.
Yeah, they like let's get this black fighter against this white fighter. Let's use race to kind of build it up, and then you got Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather.
There you go.
You know, something that people just want to see. Why? It's probably going to be a terrible match. You know, it doesn't even make sense, but people want to see it, and that's what they're able to create. And we don't realize that. I mean, how I look at it, I just assume that all politicians are either, even if they don't start off, you know, they may be super naive in the beginning and think like, oh, yeah, I'm just doing this to kind of save the world and do all this other stuff. Their entire, from the time that they start, unless it's like a Trump thing, but the time that they start, the majority of them, they're constantly compromising themselves, compromising their morals and principles in order to receive funding, but they convince themselves that, oh, it's okay if I do this because it's for the greater good. The higher I go up, it's going to help everybody, because the more I succeed, the more everybody else will. But you're changing who you are as you grow.
That's right.
So then when you get to that position, you're no longer that person who you were when you started. Yeah. So I assume that all politicians are just lying and I look at it like a business. A business is going to tell
they're cutting the corner for quote unquote the greater purpose. But then by accepting things that you would never do as a human being, a moral, noble human being, you're compromising your soul.
That 100%.
And you're ultimately you're leading yourself astray.
And they're around people who build them up to say like, the world's going to be better with you in office. The world's going to be better. And you're confused. No, the world's not necessarily going to be better with you in office. And if you took a step back, it's almost like, you know, Tucker Carlson, with him getting fired, he put out an interview the next day saying like, you know, him just not even being in those fights, you know, for a couple of days allowed him to kind of see like how dumb some of the arguments that he was having. And that's like any of us, you know, we'll argue. Imagine like at a family table, you start arguing about one thing and then it escalates into all these different areas. And then you're like, yo, this is stupid.
Why are we
This
fighting?
is stupid, but it's entertaining. You know what I mean? It may be entertaining. People are looking at it. So it's a responsibility that I think people have to understand that all these news anchors, their job is to not tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Their job is to make sure that you tune in to them tomorrow and more people tune in. That's the job. Politicians, their job is to not fulfill the promises that they make to you. Their job is to get reelected and to, you know, figure out how they can move on to the next position.
Their job is to get reelected.
That's it.
That's
it. So when you understand that, there is no trust. Like when people say, well, I trust this person more than that person, I'm already looking at it like, clearly you're like, they think that those are like the quote unquote smart people that really think they understand and think that they can read this person and they're like 3% better than that person. So they're all crooked. They're all crooked. They're all and even if they're not crooked, then the ones that aren't crooked would probably appreciate me saying that they're all crooked, because it's like if you're not, you understand it's a small percentage, in my opinion.
But we're, you know, and that's what maybe we need different leaders.
Differently, yeah.
We actually probably need the leaders who don't want to be the leaders.
Ones. It's like with policing. I used to always tell, like when all the policing, murderers and stuff were happening, and you know, I have some people that I'm close to in law enforcement, and I would always say, like, the people that don't want to be cops, you know, that aren't just like, hey, I want to, like I want, you know, I can't wait to get, you know what I mean? Like, that's probably the person that's going to be a little bit more logical. At least the people that I've seen that have had, you know, the more logical approaches. And I've seen it more so where it's like, hey, like, this isn't something that you're just like, you can't wait to just lock somebody. You know what I mean? Like, it should be a different approach. And it's the same thing with politicians. And that's why I love where we are with YouTube. I love where you are with YouTube because it leveled the playing field. And perhaps Donald Trump did this because for the longest, you had to have a process to become influential enough to have these high positions.
You didn't know the right people.
You needed to know this person. Yeah, and you got to go through all these things. Now it's like, I'm going to jump on and give my opinion. What makes a politician's opinion who relies on and bases what they need to say in order to get elected and to raise funding, I'm not getting $1. Yeah, like I'm gonna say,
you're authentic.
Say whatever. Yeah.
What's interesting, and you know, doing some of the advocacy work I've done, you know, for years, going back a few years, was seeing how the political process works. Where how these people aren't just people that are like, hey, I want to get elected. No, like these are people who follow a very specific process in a very established system, who are tapped based on what they've, you know, specific things that make them good. They're curated, and it's almost they're manufactured. So it could be anyone. It's a playbook, and you're just playing a role. It's almost like you're playing a role in a play, and you played that role pretty well. Whereas, you know, organically driven people with good ideas are probably not going to get to the stage they need to get to have that level of influence. It's a very manufactured process for our leaders or our elected leaders.
I agree.
You know, and it may not. That's why we're like, oh, why are we choosing between this guy and that guy? And you'd be a great, you know, like, yeah, maybe you would, but you didn't, you know, bow before the right people.
Yeah. And everything is set up to get like the most extreme people, you know, to kind of compete, right? In my opinion, where somebody brought up an interesting concept. I was talking to somebody down in Florida, a chiropractor down there, and he had got into politics. And one of the things that he was looking to push was open primaries. And when he explained it to me, I was like, this kind of makes a lot of sense. Now, I still wanted to think about it, but I'm still thinking about it even as I'm expressing it, you know, out here. But it's the concept that right now, you know, we don't necessarily get the two best candidates. We just get whoever the Republicans nominate. We get whoever the Democrats nominate. Why not keep the whole thing open? You know, let's vote for the primary so that way we'll get, just the two best people. You know, the two quote-unquote best people. Everything is so strategic, and if we're not intelligent enough to kind of see through a lot of those things, then we're going to get bamboozled.
Money plays into
and
it
money,
too.
Yeah, and money.
And that's what ultimately, you know, unfortunately drives it, is that whoever has the most money can get on the TVs and can get all their Google, you know, like all the systems that take the money.
It's like being a surgeon. You have to compete against these big hospital systems, or maybe another group that may have a lot of money. They may have, you know, put all their efforts together. So now if they can put up more billboards, if they can put up more Google ads, if they can put up more jingles on the radio, then people are going to perceive them as the go-to person for a particular surgery, where that's not the case.
It's the psychology of advertising, right? The more times you see something, the more our minds generate trust in that thing, regardless of whatever it may be. You know, so, you know, but that's, we covered a lot of things today.
We did. And I'm sure we'll have a part 2, part 3. Yeah.
We got a lot covered. We got through the NFL experience, and where you're at today. Thanks for coming out, man.
No, I appreciate it.
I appreciate that.
I'm looking forward to what BTV does.
Part 2.
Please, this is thank you for doing this, because a lot of people, you know, I know how busy you are, and a lot of people would make the excuse, you know, to say like, I can't really get into that, but it's important. It's important for us to to have an identity beyond, you know, our profession, and to be able to have voices like yourself, like we talk about. So we're not just only hearing, you know, the certain ones that do this professionally, the professional politicians. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Give out your handles.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. So Instagram is just OHGI_Big Fish. Then we have YouTube. Matter of fact, forget all that. Just go to YouTube. YouTube at the OG Network. I don't care about all the other stuff, but just YouTube, the OG Network.
OHGI.
OHGI, the OHGI Network. So, yeah, and we appreciate it. You know, more convos like this.
All right, my man.
Big bro. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing it.